ASMR. Welcome to our Whisper podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, Whisper.
People who do that. I've literally seen people on YouTube who just like scratch their armpits for 20 minutes and they got like 100 subs.
It's a massive turn on for some people. Don't know why.
Not like you. You're a very sexually prudent and pro-British.
Shall we start scratching?
I am. I took the. I'm as heterosexual as it gets, by the way. I took the "How gay are you" test, and I was actually the bottom right corner of straight. So
there's a "How gay are you" test.
That is the ultimate sign of being secure in your heterosexuality, isn't it?
No, it was interesting.
No, you took a test, mate. You took a test, and you're telling everyone that's how straight you are.
I'm a family man.
You're very assured in your sexuality. So you took a test, and you turned out that you weren't gay at all.
Can we?
Not remotely, so far the other way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome back. This is Political Dregs. It's been a while. Happy to be back. I'm Calvin. With me is Joel, Hamish, and Amir. How are you doing, guys?
Hi, Calvin.
Good, everyone. Hi.
Very good to be here.
Nice to be here. So 2 days ago, Saturday, the 29th of February, Sir Philip Rutnam, who is or was the permanent secretary to the Home Office, 33-year distinguished career as a civil servant, Harvard graduate, he resigned. He resigned with a very long statement. He came out to the press and he said that his position as permanent secretary to the Home Office was untenable. He could no longer continue. And why? Because of a 10-day vicious and orchestrated briefing campaign. So basically, he believes that there was a campaign to bully him out of office and that it was suggested that he was leaking media reports when in fact he wasn't. He wasn't? Well, we don't know. He was talking about shouting, swearing, belittling people, unreasonable and repeated demands, and he talked about a creation of fear in the office. And then he suggested that Pointless Patel, or as some may call her, Priti Patel, was the orchestrator of what was happening. And then there was a meeting that was suggested by the Cabinet Office to resolve the situation between him and Pointless Patel, and she just blanked him. She just did not engage, even though the Cabinet Office was trying to resolve the situation. She did not engage, and he resigned. And now he's pursuing constructive dismissal. He did suggest that they wanted to make a financial settlement, which he, in my opinion, rightly so, rejected. And this is it. This is all guns are blazing. He's out. He's no longer a civil servant. And he did this, in his words, to protect all of his colleagues, the 35,000 other civil servants who came under her domain. I mean, I think that she is way out of her league. That's pretty much what I think. I think she's way out of her league. She's been over-promoted too quickly, too soon, and she should not be Home Secretary. Not because she couldn't be Home Secretary in the future, but I just think she doesn't have the experience of high office, of high government. And actually, if you want to blame anyone, I wouldn't necessarily blame her, because we know what she's like. If you go back to 2011 and Question Time, when she was trying to argue about the death penalty and how it was okay, I mean, her arguments were completely messed up. I just think she's just way over her head. And if you want to blame anyone, you have to really blame Boris Johnson. Quite simply, he has over promoted people into positions of high office who would unquestionably support him in his quest to dominate the government and to do whatever he wants. And I really think if we reflect on everything that's happened in the past and how these people like Priti Patel, Dominic Raab and co have been promoted so quickly, and how key figures in previous governments, like Jeremy Hunt or like Philip Hammond, have been kind of sidelined. I do feel that this is an orchestrated plan by Boris Johnson and co. to make this situation happen. And now what you're having is a little bit of pushback from long-standing, highly respected. You know, he had a knight. He was a knight. He was a knight.
Yeah, but every permanent secretary is a knight. This is just an HR squabble, isn't it? There's a new Secretary of State, and there's a personality clash. That's what it is. There's no wider significance to this, isn't there?
Well, I think there's some interesting points around this. I have encountered many Tory MPs in my political career, and some of them are actually very nice. Theresa Villiers, James Cleverly, Karen Bradley. So there are nice MPs around. I would not put Priti Patel in that category, though, based on my personal interactions with her. There is certainly a large amount of empathy missing in terms of my encounters with her, I would say. And so I am not remotely surprised at what has happened here. I do, however, think that Sir Philip is also rather disingenuous as well, that he has had a long track record of failure as a civil servant. So and he's been consistently promoted. So I do think that this reminds me a bit of one of those Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm situations where the scenario is set up where both sides are sort of half to blame and quite extreme, and that's sort of a commentary on the time. So I think that's what's happening here. Priti is certainly not the nicest individual to encounter. She's got a manner which is very off-putting, so I can understand how that could have affected her relationship with Sir Philip. However, Sir Philip also seems to represent that sort of negative, cannot-do attitude in the civil service, and certainly in the Home Office, that does need reform. So I think reform was needed in the civil service. Perhaps she's the lightning rod to create that reform, but I do not think that she will be Home Secretary within the next couple of years, and certainly not leading into the general election. Boris doesn't really need her by the next general election, so I think this is actually quite useful for Boris to get a lot of this creative tension, if you like, out of the way now.
What a load of rubbish. Oh my gosh. I think it's all of it. It's a messy situation.
Did you get it?
Sorry,
Calvin? Have you had better experiences with Mrs. Patel?
Whether I like her personally or not doesn't matter. I think she's a competent minister. She's been a minister since 2014, 2015. To say she's no experience is a lie.
But she was sacked as a minister, wasn't she, for conspiring with
for having meetings in Israel? Who gives a shit?
With the Likud party of Israel.
I think the disgrace here is Sir Philip saying, "Oh, I haven't been talking with the media behind the officer's back," and then he makes a media statement. What civil servant resigns with a press briefing? A briefing against the minister as well. That's disgusting.
He was permanent secretary to the Home Office. He was the highest.
Yes, exactly. It was completely inappropriate for him to do that, and he should lose his knighthood because of it. It was an attention-seeking briefing against a minister because he didn't want to follow her orders. And he says she bullied him. She didn't bully him. She made him do stuff that he didn't want her to do. This is a minister who's actually trying to cut net migration figures for the first time in a long, long time. And the Home Office don't want to see that happen. The Foreign Office don't want to see that happen. The civil service doesn't want to see that happen. So they'll fight back. They'll fight against it. And it's a typical minister situation.
How do you answer the accusations of shouting, swearing, belittling people, unreasonable and repeated demands?
Making demands of the civil service to actually do their job. It's outrageous. What I will say is I think this is actually, and it's a lot of people on the left who are coming out against Priti Patel. And I think there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of sexism involved. People think she's the wrong type of Asian. People think she's not actually BME enough to be in this position. It's really, really disgusting seeing some of this stuff coming out on social media. People dislike her for all the wrong reasons.
I don't think it's the worst thing, Calvin. For you to start throwing accusations of racism around is a little bit unfortunate for you as well, because that's
why is it unfortunate
really not what you like. Because you don't like it when it's used by the left. Often when they complain and say things are racist, you don't like that. So I really don't think that this is a racist thing against Priti. It's to do with her character and her personality.
But it's not. Since the moment she got promoted to the office, people have been saying, "Oh, she's the wrong type of Asian. She's not the kind of Asian we want. We want more people who represent us. She's not one of them." It's been quite explicit. So it's not implied racism. It's not the bullshit that the left make up. It is actually going on.
I think a lot of this has been slightly blown out of proportion, and I'm not convinced that there's anything more at the root of this than a personality dispute at a department. I don't think that Sir Philip Rutnam particularly wanted to implement the policies of the government, and I think that really gets to the crux of the problem. I think we don't have a political or politicised civil service. That may be a good thing.
But we shouldn't.
Well, we don't have party appointees, I should say. But clearly Brexit has been such a culture shift that a lot of civil servants have taken a quite a partisan view. That's unfortunate because we can have a lot of benefit. We can get a lot of benefit out of an independent, depoliticised civil service. But I don't agree with Amir that this goes to some sort of wider issue. I think it's an unfortunate personality.
A wider bullying issue in the Conservative Party? You don't agree with that, Hamish? I would have thought that you would be the first person to have your hands up. Bullying in the Conservatives isn't uncommon. It happens throughout the ranks. And here you have a person who has potentially utilised the ineffectiveness of the Conservative Party in stamping out bullying to push her agenda. Now, you're talking to us about her.
So Philip, the permanent secretary of the Home Office, is not, thankfully for him, covered by the Conservative Party's procedures insofar as they exist on these issues. I am glad to see that the civil service is taking a renewed look at its sort of HR functions, especially in relation to special advisors. And I did think that some of the stuff that was coming out of Dominic Cummings around the reshuffle was pretty appalling. Whether or not there is a problem with bullying in the Conservative Party is a slightly different matter, I would suggest.
It's a cultural problem. I mean, these are people who are surrounded by it, who are accustomed to it, and therefore, when they are elevated in their positions of greatness in government, then maybe they think that this is the way to propagate their agenda.
That may be true. That may be true. And I do think that there is a slightly unpleasant sort of underlying culture war in a lot of this, which is coming by some of them from some of the more strident, burn the world Cummins fanboys, which is, that the civil service represents the old world and let's drain the swamp, burn it to the ground, in pursuit of our sort of ideological purity. As a Tory, I'm sort of hesitant to enjoy that kind of approach because I do have a certain fondness for the old institutions of this country.
But it's not about tearing them down, Hamish. It's about restoring them to their former glory or their former value. Because don't forget, Tony Blair politicised the civil service quite dramatically. Before that, it wasn't in the state that it is now. It's not about getting rid of the civil service. It's about returning it to how it should be. I think that's what Cummings' stance is. That's what my stance is, anyway.
Yes, and one of the things that the Conservative Party have done really badly in the past 10 years is promote their sort of people into public roles and into quangos, into public positions. You still have the old new Labour types and Blairites still filling up all these positions, and that the Conservative Party have been shockingly bad at filling those public appointments.
Well, yeah, I think there is definitely a need for some reform of the Home Office. It was declared not fit for purpose by John Reid back in 2006. So there's been an issue for a long time around its effectiveness. And I've been saying for a long time, we have this 80-seat Tory majority, fantastic. We have the most right-wing Home Secretary Priti since Michael Howard, fantastic in itself. but let's see the results and let's see what she delivers. And as I said, we are already, that's a pretty extraordinary step for this chap, Sir Philip, underperforming as he may have been, to have done this. And he's given up the chance of financial settlement. He's given up the chance of got a gold-plated civil service pension, I assume. So this is pretty extreme stuff. And I just think it's the character of Mrs. Patel would always have created this kind of explosion, if you like. And perhaps it's deliberate from Boris. As I said, I think she would be a very useful lightning rod for him in this early part of the Johnson administration, to see just what kind of reforms can be achieved by knocking some heads together. And that's clearly what she's doing. And I think, the bullying stuff, we really don't know about that. The only thing I know is my own personal experience. She hasn't bullied me, I will say that, but she the way that she interacts with people compared to other MPs who I've experienced is certainly suboptimal, and it does not surprise me that this situation has emerged.
I think you make a good point about potentially how she manages people. I wonder whether there is a more sort of a wider point about the sort of people who end up in Parliament and therefore end up in ministerial roles, where effectively what they have to do is manage a great number of people to implement particular policy objectives. We don't have MPs who have experience running businesses or running teams of people, groups of people. We have now a political class that has graduated through being involved in student politics, being involved hanging around Westminster in pubs and clubs and being consultants and advisors, not actually achieving anything in the public or the private sector. Now, in the old days, you used to have barristers who were probably the worst people in terms of working within a team, but at least they had a bit of experience of the wider world. We don't have those people who have who've been able to deliver objectives and work within groups of people and get outcomes. What we have is a slightly sort of slavishly sort of political, sort of greasy pole obsessed type of person who's never run so much as their own bath, and that may be something which is beginning to bear its fruit by having ministers who can't deal with running their departments.
Hamish, I've seen her in person a few times at the Conservative conferences. Her manner and her demeanour is always difficult to engage with, and you're promoting someone to basically one of the top representatives of the government. Maybe
I'm not sure
I've
promoted her to anything, actually, but go on.
Sorry?
I'm not sure I've promoted her to anything, but go on.
Well, you're not doing it, but I mean, it has been done, and maybe Joel has a point. Maybe it is a lightning rod. Maybe there is another agenda. We know how Cummings is kind of like a bit kind of conspiratorial. I don't know. I mean, he does plan ahead, and maybe this is part of his plan. Who knows? I mean, it's certainly not Boris's plan. But the fact of the matter is, this is a person, long established career. Whether it was right or wrong or not for him to come out publicly, who knows? Okay, probably was wrong. Maybe he should have taken a settlement. Who knows? We don't really know because we're not down that path. But the reality is, this creation of fear in the civil service is uncalled for. It's not what we want. It's not what we need. It's not what this country voted for at the last general election. And to be honest with you, I think that this is going to make our country worse, not better. Fear is never a good thing. And I don't understand why you guys are so okay with it to exist and to appear all of a sudden as a result of these people coming into power.
Well, I think that's slightly overblowing.
Well, he said it. He said the creation of fear. I didn't say it.
I think he may be slightly overblowing the issue. Now,
Why did he resign?
I think because he had a personality and a political clash with the Secretary of State, and also it was a dispute that obviously got out of hand and got into the media, and his position became untenable when Number 10 refused to publicly support him. The rights and wrongs of that can be debated. I agree with you insofar as I do not think that the best way of managing people is to hector and shout at them. I don't think that gets the right results. I do think that there is a strain in the civil service that thinks that Brexiteers are stupid and that Priti Patel, is sort of thick idiot who doesn't know what she's doing and is trying to appeal to, the sort of low information voters who don't know what's best for them. And that needs to be stamped out. Civil service need to understand that they are there to implement the political directives of the administration of the day.
It's also their job to correct. It's also their job to advise, especially when someone is out of their depth, clearly out of their depth. I mean, she's been out of their depth her whole career.
It is not their job to undermine. You can certainly say, well, actually, the best way of achieving that is a different way. But clearly, that the Home Office has, and the wider civil service has got an aversion to the political priorities of this government. And that is bad news. That's bad news for us, by the way, as voters and as people in this country, because we don't get to elect them. We don't get to get rid of them. We've just had a whole Brexit process, which a lot of the issues, a lot of what was at stake was about who governs us. We do not want to replace one unelected bureaucracy with another. I don't think that fundamentally this goes to anything wider than a personality dispute. And there's nothing that you said which actually convinces me that that's the case.
Well, it's going to be quite a high-profile personality dispute when the court case comes along.
True.
And I predict that she will not survive that court case. That will be my next Dregs prediction.
I agree with Joel.
This is an orchestrated takedown of a minister. That's
exactly
by the civil service. That's exactly what this is.
But I mean, isn't it what she deserved? I mean,
No.
No, it's not what she deserved. I mean, she could have responded to his messages. She could have engaged with the cabinet office meeting that was organised by 10 Downing Street. She didn't. She ignored it.
Interestingly, and I know you guys don't like it when I talk about law, but he's probably got quite a good constructive dismissal case, because constructive dismissal, essentially, without getting into any sort of detail, is not when someone sacks you directly, but makes it impossible for you to continue your job.
Well, I did resign in a former life, and I constructively dismissed myself.
Well, that's not a thing. So,
well, it is. It happened.
Well, constructive dismissal, to take a ridiculous example, is to put a gun to your head and say you've got to leave, or we'll pull the trigger. So you say, "Oh, I'm resigning," but actually your situation is untenable. He probably has a pretty good case for constructive dismissal, and I don't think that it's appropriate for these issues to be litigated in the press and through briefings. And I think both sides are at fault in that respect. And frankly, if the government and if the number 10 see that employment law applies equally to them as it does to anyone else, then that is probably a good thing.
And I think that's a good place to wrap that up. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.